Hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar this week where we're talking about how to look after your heart. My name is Andy, I'm the clinical lead here at Redicare, and we're bringing this webinar to you in partnership with LloydsPharmacy. So we'll get started just to be fair to you who have turned up on time, and just to let you guys know, I suppose, just a bit of background about Redicare. We prevent and treat the major chronic conditions, so overweight and obese conditions, high blood pressure, pre-diabetes, and dyslipidemia, which is just unfavorable levels of cholesterol. In terms of our results, we're very data driven, and we focus quite a bit on publishing our results and having clinical validation. Typically what we see is a 1% reduction in HbA1c, which is a marker for blood sugar control, about 6 kgs, which is roughly a stone in weight loss in 8 weeks, and significant reductions in triglycerides, cholesterol levels, and particularly in HbA1c. So normalized HbA1c there in that particular study was 48%, meaning 48% of the participants in that 8-week trial actually reversed their diabetes or went into diabetic remission, I should say. So guys, when it comes to heart disease, the most important thing is understanding how the food you eat affects your heart. So heart disease is very much rooted in something known as insulin resistance. Now, insulin resistance is your body becoming resistant to the action of insulin, and it's a precursor for type 2 diabetes, high cholesterol, blood pressure, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. It's also implicated in numerous different types of cancer. You do not want to be insulin resistant. So the advice that I'll be giving you around food in order to protect your heart will certainly be to eat the foods that are lower in the glycemic index and don't spike that hormone insulin, which is so deleterious or damaging to human health. So if you look at the blood sugar response to different macronutrients, different nutrients in food, so the main macronutrients, macro just meaning main, are protein, carbs, and fat. Now, when you eat not carbohydrate, but refined carbohydrate, so processed carbohydrate, you get this real steep spike and then drop in your blood sugar levels. And the problem with that is not just the energy crash and the hunger and brain fog and becoming hungry and all that sort of stuff and cognitive dysfunction. It's actually the fact that insulin must rise to match blood glucose, meaning you're going to have high blood sugar levels and also high insulin levels, because insulin's job is to lower blood sugars in the body. Now, insulin resistance, which happens when you keep spiking insulin like that, is at the root cause of heart disease. So the number one step from a dietary protocol point of view must be reducing your intake of refined carbohydrates. And you can see in the graph here on the green and blue, protein and fat in particular actually really doesn't have any impact on your insulin levels. Fat has almost a neutral effect on your insulin levels. It barely spikes them at all, whereas protein, a little bit more. If you overdo it on protein, you can end up with high blood sugar levels. But refined carbohydrates definitely are the main nutrient or macronutrient you want to move away from, or food type, I should say. So those processed carbs, your cornflakes, granola bars, even porridge, and I get a lot of abuse for that. Granola bars, cereals, cakes, even if these things are marked as being low in calories or low fat, it doesn't matter from a blood sugar and insulin point of view, and you want to get those foods minimized in your diet to have a healthier heart. So this is clear if you look at all the blue zones of our planets, and the blue zones of our planets are areas where people have much greater longevity. They tend to have a disproportionate number of centenarians, or people living till they're 100. And what they've all got in common is not vegan, vegetarian, meat eaters. It's not that. That varies from one blue zone to another. It's actually that they don't eat any processed food. So in the parts of the world that didn't get the memo about low fat and are not trying to eat low calorie or wearing Fitbits, they have by far the healthiest hearts in the world. And funnily enough, they eat the foods that we've been told to stay away from for heart health. So they eat the red meats and fats and internal organs and things like that. So it's pretty clear when you look at it from an epidemiological point of view what sort of a diet we should be following. And that's the avoidance of processed food is certainly the biggest factor there. So we knew better in the Western world, and we decided we were going to eat low-fat foods in the late 70s. I believe it was 1978 in the official guidelines. And you can see obesity, and this is not just obesity. The obesity graph is scary. this is diabetes, this is Alzheimer's, this is neurodegenerative disorders. Almost anything that can be related to diet just got dramatically worse since we started demonizing fat and calories and just focusing on these kind of highly processed foods. So we're told that red meat may be linked to an increase in your likelihood of getting heart disease. Now I say may because it's never been proven, but if that's the case, and we look at these remote tribes around the world that do consume red meats, then where is the heart disease epidemic in the Inuit tribe who eat almost exclusively red meat? They have a very high fat diet, they eat almost no fruits and vegetables, and they don't get heart disease. It's just dramatically lower than it is in westernized populations where we eat lots of processed food and fizzy drinks and avoid red meat. So the reason I say this is because there was a study came out last year where a group of 8 independent, and that's really important, researchers across a few different countries and continents looked at all the data and said their conclusion was there is no evidence that red meat causes cancer. So it's been driven by, you know, some would say vegan vegetarian ideologues, and there's been this sort of ethical and moral drive behind it. But from a clinical data, completely objective clinical data viewpoint, there is no strong evidence to suggest that having a steak and a couple of bits of bacon a week is going to dramatically increase your incidence of heart disease. None at all. I'd much rather see my patients and our patients eat that than have cornflakes or cereal bars. And you see this across all the blue zones, actually. This is something they have in common. So the key point here, guys, is no processed food, or minimize your processed food as much as possible, in particular processed carbohydrate, given the correlation with insulin resistance and heart disease. Sleep is another one, guys, and I'm skipping through these slides on purpose because I want to get as much information as I can across to you guys at Lloyds. So sleep is hugely important from a heart health point of view. So much so, there's a study done, and I can't credit my own research for this. This is Matthew Walker's research, actually, and he says this in some of his talks. He's a sleep expert. There's a study done across a couple of billion people twice a year, and that study is known as daylight savings. So with daylight savings, when the clocks go back an hour and we see everybody gets 1 hour less sleep that weekend across the world in those countries that are doing that daylight saving, there's a 27% increase in heart disease that particular weekend. Now, you might say maybe that's a coincidence that happened, you know, for the last 10 or 15 years, but it's bi-directional, because when you actually give the hour back, heart attacks go down 28%. So there's an increase in heart attacks across the world when you get an hour's less sleep. So you can see, I mean, that alone demonstrates how important sleep is for heart disease. The same goes for cancer, diabetes, and obesity, but that's just how sleep pertains to heart health. So exercise, I mean, this one goes without saying, guys, exercise is absolutely crucial for a healthy heart. Cardiovascular exercise is good. Weight training is good, and HIIT, or high intensity interval training, also very effective. I honestly believe the most undervalued and underappreciated form of exercise is walking. People think it's just walking and anyone can walk, but if you walk the dog, it's a really interesting stat. If you walk the dog 3 days a week for an hour, compared to a guy who runs a marathon or 2 every year, your difference in life expectancy is somewhere in the region of 3 to 6 months. There's no huge difference. So it just takes getting out and being active to have a healthy heart. You don't need to be running Ironmans to try and live forever. There tends to be not too much of a difference, actually. And then, guys, finally, stress. Stress can be your best friend and your worst enemy. And what I mean by that is there are a couple of different types of stress, but the most important ones to know about are acute and chronic stress. So chronic stress is over a prolonged period of time, having high levels of stress and having adrenaline and cortisol pumping through the body. But then you've also got acute stress, which is a very sharp bout or intense bout of stress, and that's not good at all. But they're the ones that are bad for your heart. There's no question that stress is bad for your heart and can kill you. But there's a different way of perceiving stress, or a different meaning of stress when it comes to health sciences, and that is Hermetic stress. Now, sometimes people say to me, you know, stress is always a bad thing. And I say, well, you're technically stressing your body a lot in the sauna. You're stressing your body when you do intermittent fasting, and you're certainly stressing your body when you exercise. your heart rate goes up, your blood volume goes up, your muscles are being torn down. So hormesis is a really important concept to know about, and hormesis is the act of putting your body under stress, but your body understanding that it has to undergo an adaptive phase after that to make you stronger. So I'll give you an example. When you see a guy who's lots of muscle, you think, there's no damage done there, he's got really strong muscle. That guy has got so much damage done to his muscle, but the muscle has been sent a signal to the body to say, we don't want this wear and tear to happen again. We need to build stronger muscle fibers, and then you have muscle building. It's known as hypertrophy. So that's essentially how hypertrophy happens, or muscle building happens. So you're tearing down the muscles. So that's a good stress. Resistance training is a good stress. Exercise, sauna, intermittent fasting, all good stresses. And another good example of that is cold baths or a cold shower. It strengthens up your immune system. A lot of interesting science emerging on that at the moment. And sauna use in particular is really good for heart health, because again, you stress your body, and essentially what sauna use is it's what's known as a mimetic for exercise, meaning that it mimics exercise from a physiological point of view. So it does almost as much good to go into the sauna for 40 minutes as it does to do a fast-paced walk on a treadmill for 40 minutes. So the physiological reaction from your body and the adaptive response it has to it in strengthening your immune system and your functions are almost as good as exercise. So there was a really interesting study actually in Finland where they looked at your incidence of heart attack. And this one is, really take this in, it's phenomenal. Your likelihood of having a heart attack, of dying from a heart attack, stroke, respiratory illness, and cancer were reduced up to 50% if you took a sauna 3 to 5 times a week. That is, if you could get a pill to do that, you'd be very, very rich. No pill has ever come close to that, none at all, not even a fraction of that. So if you can get into a sauna, now just as an aside, if you have a heart condition, if you've had any sort of heart issues recently, or you have blood pressure issues, or you're on any medication, and just to be safe, anyone at all, run it by your GP first. But saunas are hugely important, or can be a really key player in mitigating any heart issues. So guys, just to sum up, the way to look after your heart is reduce your intake of refined carbohydrates. That is hugely important. Avoid bread, cereals, granola bars, frozen pizzas, burgers, fizzy drinks, and like my wife always says jokingly, anything that tastes good. So avoid those. Eat real whole foods. So I always like to use the acronym MEAL, M-E-A-L, meaning meat and fish, eggs, added fats, and low sugar fruits and vegetables. So the vast majority of my diet is made up of those sort of foods. So just whole foods. And someone said to me in a consultation recently with Redicare, they said, how do you know what to look for on a nutrition label? And I said, look, I'm being completely honest here, and I don't mean this to sound insincere, but if you're looking at a nutrition label in the first place, you've probably gone wrong. There's no nutrition labels or minimal ones on real food. You don't have to read the label on a steak or avocado or eggs or cheese to know what's in them. So that would be my advice, would be meat, eggs, fish, added fats, low sugar fruits and vegetables as much as possible. Don't fear fat. Healthy whole food sources of fat are your friend, and the calories in those fat, once you're not spiking insulin from processed carbohydrates, will not make you gain weight. Sleep more, optimize your sleep, hugely important, and aim for low intensity, steady state exercise and work up the intensity as you get fitter. So guys, thank you so much for your time. I hope you found that useful, and we will go to a quick Q&A shortly. Before we do, I just want to say again, or just reiterate, we're delighted to be partnered up with LloydsPharmacy. We believe they're we know they're a super progressive pharmacy. We have a great connection to their oh, I'm sorry, just lost connection there for a second, who have a great connection with their customers and a great reach in the community. So the program that we run in partnership with Lloyds Treating Chronic Disease is known as Redicare Control, and you can access it by going to redicarecontroldtx.com, and you see the link just here. So controldtx.com/LloydsPharmacy. It's €50 for the first month, €15 every month thereafter, with no minimum contracts. And that includes, it's an online program for weight loss, type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetes, high cholesterol and high blood pressure. It's clinically validated and we've published studies on our results. And you get your meal plans, shopping lists, food guides, a members forum, and probably the most attractive part of it, you can book unlimited consultations with the likes of myself or any of our health coaches, and we'll ensure that you hit your targets. So that's what the program looks like. You've recipes, meal plans, food guides, shopping lists, cooking videos, recipe cooking videos, all of my weekly videos, all of my webinars in the webinar library, and all the guides you need. So if you want to book a complimentary consultation, so no obligation if you want to have a consultation with myself, you can do that by going to info@redicare.ie. So info@redicare.ie. Guys, I'm going to let you get back to your this absolutely beautiful evening, just stunning altogether. So get back to it and get out and get the last few rays of sun and enjoy it. I will speak to you next week. I'm back on next week, so make sure to keep an eye out for that and have a lovely evening. Thanks for your time, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.